Is cultural life a form of life? Several billion people observe the world and exchange messages on a daily basis. You are one of them, and this presentation is one such message. If you consider the sheer scale of communication, it may seem overwhelming. Nevertheless, the immediate outcome is easy to describe. In the big picture, communication creates culture. When you zoom in, you go on to see that within culture there are smaller units that grow and shrink, often independent of each other. Finally, if you keep zooming in, you come to the scale of individual ideas. Each of the previous units holds scores of individual messages and ideas. Thus, in only 3 steps, we have come all the way from communication to culture and back to ideas. Before we continue, let's make sure we get one thing right from the beginning. Maybe you agree that there is culture and that there are ideas, but you feel that culture is unruly and that there are no natural units that can independently grow or shrink as described before. If you hold this belief, I must disappoint you. The existence of cultural units is well known. Trend scientists call them trends. Social scientists call them social fields. Students of memetics call them memes. Fashion designers call them fashions. And artists and architects call them styles. These matching word pairs show how central the cultural units are to the people who create or those who study them. Last word pair may seem at first to break the rule. Artist and style don't seem to match quite as well as fashion designer and fashion. However, the word style originates from stylus, the Latin for drawing utensil or chisel, which is the one object that has accompanied artists since the beginning of art. Indeed, the insight that there exist cultural units such as styles may be as old as art itself. The next question is how communication, culture, cultural units, and individual ideas are related to each other. But maybe you feel that this question is too broad, or you think it is irrelevant for you as an individual. If so, imagine a blackout that stops all worldwide communication. Already after the first few hours of blackout, the human world enters a deep crisis. Markets crash, airplanes collide, and cities stop working for their inhabitants. From this thought experiment, you realize that communication is the vital pulse of culture. The more people live on this planet, the more relevant it is to understand what keeps this cultural pulse alive. In medicine, the study of the human pulse has led to the development of straightforward methods to quantify it, regardless of the fact that trillions of cells contribute to its physiological appearance. Let us once more return to the question how communication, culture, cultural units, and individual ideas are related to each other. The answer that I would like to give here has 2 dimensions: cultural reproduction and creativity. By reproduction, I mean that people copy ideas, behaviors, art, architecture. Let us imagine a world where everything is just copy-paste. In many respects, this world is not unlike the real world. In the real world, fashions would hardly exist without models and without people who inspire themselves from the models. Copying also exists in art. Art reproductions have been around for as long as we know that people valued art. The beautiful part about copying, and that's the part that makes culture diverse, is that we don't copy the same thing all the time. We live in a dynamic world, a changing world. Some models are most attractive and people copy their style in a furious frenzy. However, things change. What was initially attractive becomes commonplace. People have a wonderful ability of getting bored and searching for new things. They become curious. Curiosity makes the promise that it will make our life interesting and that it will broaden our horizons. This is why fashions and styles come and go like waves, and this is why there are many waves. The other dimension of culture is that of creativity. Creativity is all about artists who create art, about architects who create architecture, about writers who write, about scientists who make science. Along the path of creativity, we must recognize that reproduction is not always exact. Sometimes reproduction is approximate. Take the example of a scientist. Scientists often reproduce known experiments exactly. They replicate some research to check whether the results are really valid and robust. Other times, the same scientists make changes. They create a new related experiment. The new experiments broaden or strengthen an existing topic of research. What I propose here is that exact and approximate reproduction are parallel channels. The consequence of this proposition is that similar ideas group together. Similar experiments create topics of research. Similar designs create fashions and styles. You can test this idea on yourself. If I say tree, do you also see leaves, trunks, roots, and forests? If I say building, do you also see windows, walls, interiors, or cities? Many people do. The point is that similar things exist in groups of similar things. Somebody mentions one thing to you and many other similar things come to your mind just by themselves. The things that are in the same group belong together as associations that we make, because they reinforce each other through our brain's creativity. This is why the unit of cultural evolution is not the isolated idea, but the group of related ideas. Figuratively, think of a string on a musical instrument. No matter where exactly you plucked the string, it vibrates and sounds in its entirety. Styles are the creative strings of culture. So, this is the core of the theory. The next step is to formulate these ideas as a mathematical model that can be empirically tested. Only then we can know whether the theory makes valid predictions. The good news is that I can save you from doing the math. I already did it for you. My most recent results are published in my article Cultural Life, Theory and Empirical Testing. Let me summarize. First, the concept of creativity does indeed explain why ideas cluster into coherent groups. In the groups, similar ideas come together and grow together. Second, the concept of replication and that of curiosity explain how groups compete with each other and how curiosity broadens our horizons. Curiosity explains the evolution of diverse groups, which is a key component of almost every culture. In some, culture is creative and diverse. Putting theory into mathematics has another advantage. The math that my theory of cultural life leads to is nothing else but the core mathematics of life science. Over the last century, two sets of equations in the life sciences have evolved to explain more and more empirical observations. They are now found in many surveys of theoretical biology, and they have also been unified and formulated as one single equation, the replicator-mutator equation. In my case, I ended up with a mathematically equivalent formula. Call it the replication-creativity equation. The replicator part of the equation is what I discussed here under reproduction and curiosity. The mutator part of the equation is what I discussed under creativity. So, yes, the answer to the question that I chose as a title is yes. Cultural life, down to its mathematical details, is a form of life. cultural life follows paths that are predictable through the equation of life. Finally, what is striking is that many researchers in fields such as sociology and digital humanities used mathematics that are equivalent to mine, too. They used this math as a method of analysis. They figured out that using this math for their analyses of culture was giving meaningful empirical results. And they started to endlessly debate the meaning of those results. At one point, digital humanists did not know how to call the groups of ideas that they found, and so they called them genres. At another point, other researchers called the same groups topics of public discourse. These names certainly broaden the vocabulary already mentioned. They make a great addition to trend, social field, fashion, and style. My interpretation not only shows the real scope of what groups of ideas really are, but it also made new predictions possible. One of my predictions was that groups of ideas have predictable geographical footprints, and I developed a way to test this. Groups of ideas are not random. Many groups create hotspots of cultural life on the map. The center of the hotspots is where reproduction is the strongest. The blur is created through creativity. And multiple groups coexist next to each other, supported by curiosity. The other prediction is that life, including cultural life, tends to oscillate between the mutator and the replicator part of the equation. When the first part is active, there is growth. When the latter is active, there is diversification. And this latter part shows as formation or as recession. Many of these insights require more time to be fully understood. But I am now ready to conclude this video with something big. Let me propose a big synthesis of life. Life science is not just ecology, epidemics, microbiology, linguistics. Life science is also the study of cultural geography, social science, economics, culture and history, architecture, artificial intelligence, psychology. Ultimately, all of these fields study life in its creativity and diversity. And in all of these fields, the equation of life fosters an important foundation. It will help us to hold together, and united we stand.